Welcome to Mortification of Spin, a casual conversation about things that count, with Carl Trueman and Todd Pruitt, a podcast of the Alliance of Confessing Evangelicals. Let's join this week's conversation.
Welcome to Mortification of Spin. My name's Carl Trueman. I'm a professor at Grove City College in Western Pennsylvania, and I'm here as always with my friend and colleague, the Right Reverend Todd Pruitt, pastor
Always
of
right.
Covenant Presbyterian Church in Harrisonburg in the beautiful Shenandoah Valley. Good to see you, Todd.
Good to see you, Carl.
How are things in?
Things could not be better in the great state of Virginia, the Commonwealth, as we call it. The weather's beautiful. The leaves are green, and things are relatively peaceful these days. And so, yes, it's good. It's good to be a resident in the Shenandoah Valley. Is it? Let me see. It's June, so is it still snowing out in Western Pennsylvania?
Stopped last week.
Okay.
We're actually up to about 85 degrees today. I got out, and as you would have done yourself, I'm sure, Todd, I went out and did a 16-mile bike ride this morning. Down the hills.
Oh yeah. I'd be all over that.
Yeah. I know you're a huge physical exercise guy.
I describe myself as being very indoorsy.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I was telling my wife the other day, I think six packs are massively overrated myself.
Completely. I see it as a sign of male insecurity that they would need to have a six pack.
Yeah, that's it. You've nailed it. Male insecurity.
Yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
Yes. Anyway, we have some special guests today.
I was saying, what are you teaching Linus? He's growing up to be a man.
We're teaching him toxic masculinity.
That's right. That's right.
We just interviewed Nancy for the podcast.
Nancy Piercy,
uppermost in our mind at the moment. Yeah. Anyway, I want to introduce our guests. It's a kind of revenge podcast today because I've been on the podcast run by these three characters, and I've been in the hot seat on two occasions. So I'm turning the tables today, and I'm going to put our guests on the hot seat. And our guests all come from the podcast Kids Talk Church History. One of them you've met before on this podcast, and that is our good friend Simonetta Carr, author of so many great books for children on religious and Christian themes. We had her on a few years ago to talk about the great book she did on Michelangelo. At the time, more recently, she's just published a kind of comprehensive church history that we'll be talking about a little bit later on. The other two guests are Linus and Emma Sloan, who are two younger members of the podcasting community, but with a passion for church history. So welcome, Kids Talk Church History people.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Excited to be here.
Good. It's great to have you all on. I want you to know something, not to make you nervous, but I was recently at a gathering of PCA pastors, Presbyterian Church in America, PCA pastors, and I had a group of 3 or 4 pastors from China that had flown into the U.S. for that conference, all come up to me to introduce themselves to me because they listened to Mortification of Spin in China.
Wow.
So no pressure. No pressure whatsoever.
Okay.
Just because people all over the world listen to this.
How depressing must it be in China that you have to listen to us?
It was funny. I asked them, I said, now, so y'all are allowed to listen to us. You don't get any trouble. And they said, oh no, you all don't say anything that gets us in trouble with the Chinese government. So, there you go.
Well, I'm going to kick off by picking on Emma because she is the sort of the grand inquisitor of the Kids Talk Church History podcast. So, Emma,
only on the episodes that you've been on.
Well, it's great to have you on the podcast, Emma. Tell us, what do you hope to achieve with the Kids Talk Church History podcast, and why do you think it's important?
That is a very big cosmic question. Wow. Okay. I guess the goal of it is to connect Christian children with their broader family, because if we're brothers and sisters in Christ, both the people who are living at the time, but also back through time. And so that's kind of why I love church history, is because, it's our family, right? And it's very important to know your family history, both because it will help you make good decisions, because we'd be like, wow, look at all these people who made really good decisions. And also you'd be like, wow, look at all these people who made really bad decisions. And then you will hopefully not do those really bad decisions. So I guess that's my motivation / the reason why the podcast is because it's, this is our family. We're united in Christ, and that is a beautiful and very important thing. And also it's kind of proof in a way of, the validity of what we believe, because God has preserved his church for, 6,000 years or more. Mm-hmm. And that is glorious and something that should be taught and celebrated. And I don't know. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. Actually, it might explain why the Chinese listen to us, because they listen and think, man, listen to all those terrible mistakes. We need to avoid those. No, that's a great answer, Emma.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, as you were sharing that, one of the things that went through my mind is when I first sat in a church history class in seminary and had a good teacher. Some of those very thoughts kind of came through my mind the very first time. I hadn't really been taught that in my church growing up. My church did a lot of things well, didn't do that well. And I remember sitting in a church history class for the first time with a really fine teacher. And I can remember distinctly feeling two things early on in that semester. One was, wow, I really wish this wasn't the first time I was really learning these things. And the other thing was, this is really encouraging in my walk with the Lord. I was so encouraged to be reminded of the deep rootedness of what we're a part of. We're not a part of something that just came on the world scene. We're a part of a big story that God's been writing. And that was really encouraging to me. And I was 23 years old at the time and just really starting to learn that. And I'm jealous for younger people. I'm jealous for kids and for teenagers to start learning that, so that they'll start to grasp that stuff when I wish I had at that age. So I love what you're doing. It's really good.
Do you have a particular favorite character from church history? Linus, let's throw it open to Linus here. Well, first of all, Linus, how did you get involved with the podcast? And then secondly, is there a particular figure in church history that you're fascinated by? And if so, why?
Well, I first became involved because I was Mrs. Carr's Sunday school student for a couple of years.
That would help.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and because she asked my older brother and older sister, so I figured I would be next, and I was. And for a favorite character, it would probably be I really liked Egeria, because she traveled and took notes, and I just thought that's a really cool story.
Oh, wow. Could you explain for our listeners who she was?
Give us a little,
give us a little bit of background.
Well, it's been a while, but I can. So she was this woman, and she would go around and travel to different places, and she would document her travels and her findings, and she would go to like religious celebrations, and she would document them in a journal. And parts of that journal were found today.
Oh, wow. What sort of time period was she alive in?
I'm not actually sure. I forget. Mrs. Carr will probably know.
I bet you she will.
I would probably. Pretty much 4th century.
4th century.
Wow. Very early.
The age of the church fathers. Yeah. Emma, same question for you. Who, and this is a broad question. I'm sure there's lots of names you would rattle off, but if you had, if you had the opportunity to just kind of have access to one person in terms of who you read about, who would it come down to, do you think?
Well, so this person has not yet been on the podcast yet, but I love Thomas Chalmers. He's the coolest. He is so cool. Pastor, astronomy professor. He just did so much like really cool stuff. And he was Scottish, which
is great.
That's cool.
Almost as better as being English.
Much better than English. Much better than English. Yeah, Chalmers, we had Sandy Finlayson on some while back talking about his little really excellent book on Thomas Chalmers. He was a polymath. Fascinating character.
Yeah, if you want a guest on to talk about Chalmers, Sandy Finlayson is the man. He's written a book on Chalmers and really knows probably about as much about Chalmers as anyone alive.
Yep, Sandy Finlayson and George Grant would be another person to have on who's a Chalmers fanatic.
Dr. Grant is the person who introduced me to Chalmers. He's a history teacher through his online lecture things.
Go.
So
wow.
Yes.
Yep. Wonderful. And how do you prepare for each episode?
So we've kind of been gathering our bearings. So it's a little different each time. It's like, which way is going to be the best way? But Mrs. Carr will give us like some information. Sometimes we'll help write the script. Sometimes she'll just give us one and then we'll read it. And then we'll all like rehearse it together and be like, okay, is this what we want to say? And we'll be like, yes, this is what we want to say. And then we'll interview the person.
How do you choose the person to interview?
That's Mrs. Carr's choice.
So Mrs. Carr seems to be the puppet master in all this. She's the
I am
behind the throne.
Okay.
I want to throw this out though, because I have a question for Mrs. Carr, Simonetta, but just an observation, Emma, as you kind of talked about that, and just the whole idea of preparation, this is going to shock a lot of people. Carl and I do not prepare. For our
we're that good.
I'm shocked.
We literally do not prepare, and every once in a while our listeners might be able to discern that, but
the finely oiled machine occasionally breaks down, just very occasionally.
Well, the other guest that we have on here, in addition to Emma and Linus, is Simonetta Carr, who is not a stranger to our podcasts. She's been on a few times over the years because she keeps writing really wonderful books, and we'd stop having her on if she stopped writing good books, but she keeps writing good books. And I've got to tell you, this latest book of hers, published by Reformation Heritage Books, wonderful publisher, is called Church History. And it is a beautiful, big, beautifully illustrated volume. When I first got it in the mail, and I was sitting in my big chair that evening, just going through it, I was having such fun with it. I mean, Simonetta, Reformation Heritage, for those who kind of appreciate how books are made, their hardback books are really well produced. I mean, they make a good book, and the quality, I'm just talking about the physical properties at this point, the quality of the paper, the quality of the illustrations. This is such a beautiful book. And so much of your work, Simonetta, has focused a lot on juvenile readers, but this is a book I would put in anybody's hands. And I've already been encouraging folks in our church to get it, have it in your home, have it on your coffee table so that it gets passed around a lot. And so that if you've got young kids, they'll open it up and start looking in this, because this just if I'd had a book like this sitting around in our house when I was a kid, I'd have been all over this. Because for one thing, we only had 4 channels on TV at that time, and there was no social media. And I would have been all over this book as a kid, looking through it, because it's so well done. It's accessible in its writing. And so congratulations on another great book. This is terrific. And I think that this is, all of your books are really, really good, but this one is kind of your magnum opus at this point. I think this is kind of, seems to me, as I was looking through this is kind of the culmination of all the years of work that you were working towards something like this that would be more comprehensive. Tell us kind of how it came to be and what you're doing here in this book.
Okay, how it came to be. Initially, another publisher asked me if I wanted to write a church history book, something like that. But she wanted it pretty soon. I think she was going to give me 1 year to do it. And I said, just too much. And I had some ideas of maybe making it very simple, but in the end, I said, it's too much. I can't. do all that in a year. And then I was talking about it with my editor at Reformation Heritage, and he said that he thought it was a good idea, but he said, but we'll give you as long as you want, no deadline. I said, wow, that's really good. And so I started to think about it. And then around the same time, the Alliance of Confessing Evangelicals offered me a column. They wanted me to write about people in church history. And I said, well, I can do both. As I write for them, I can study church history and put things together. So basically, that's what happened. And I kept writing blog posts and study more about different times in church history. And then I don't remember when it was. I think it was 2019 or something like that. Reformation Heritage said, so is the book ready? So I thought I didn't have a deadline. But they started to put a little pressure on me, which was difficult because by that time I had just discovered a whole new world besides the Western church, like so much was going on in Africa and Asia and South America, and I just had never heard of any of that. So I could have written a lot more about those, but maybe I'll do a second edition or something.
Yeah.
What was the most interesting thing you discovered? I mean, you mentioned Africa, Asia, South America.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something that really stands out? You said, wow, I didn't know that before, and that has had a transformative impact upon how I think about the church and the history of the church.
Yeah, I think it's to find out the global church, how much was going on in other countries that we don't usually know, and just seeing things from other cultures' point of view. That was very interesting. So,
could you give us an example, Simonetta?
Well, I have written in my series of biographies. I've written about a man named Biancato, and I hope I meet him in heaven quite soon after I get there, because somebody that really intrigued me a lot. And he had such a passion for the gospel, and the way he explained, how in the 50s and 60s, African nations were getting their independence, and with the independence, there was a trend of trying to distance themselves from foreign missionaries. Not everyone did that, but many. And he was just amazing how he explained how the gospel does not belong to one nation. It's because it's about the person. And the way he explained things was so clear that I have often referred to him as the Machen of Africa. I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but that was a big revelation for me, just to see how much people that we know nothing about brought the gospel to whole nations or continents. And in Asia, Wang Mingdao, I wrote one about him. It should come out soon. Same thing, just about, and not only he's one of the many that suffered for the gospel, which is in itself amazing, but also his understanding of the gospel and his defense of justification by faith alone at a time when the country, if you have people in China listening, they might correct me, and I welcome any corrections, but I believe the country was more, they were trying to use Christianity as a tool to unite, to kind of infuse their their feelings, nationalistic feelings into Christianity. Right. So they were more like justification by love rather than faith, Yeah. So that was really interesting for me. And I think listening to voices of people that are from different cultures enrich us, because we're used to listening to ourselves, Western people talking to each other. But when you hear people who come from different cultures, they have different questions, and but then pretty much come up with the same gospel, So I think they enrich us and enrich the way we see things.
Yeah. Linus and Emma, question for you. So let's say someone's listening, and people are going to be listening to this all over the world, by the way. And they're thinking, man, this sounds really interesting, and I would love to kind of start learning more about church history. I don't have any background in being taught this. My church never really taught me this, whatever. What would you, and again, there's no wrong answer on this, but just as you think about your own experiences and some of some of your favorite things you've read, whether it's a biography or a historical survey or whatever, other than Mrs. Carr's new book, we just assume that that's the one they must read. But other than Mrs. Carr's new book, what's one that you would say, gosh, you know what? If you read this, you'll love it. It'll be fascinating, and you'll be hooked at that point. What would be? And again, it can be anything from a biography of a particular individual or a larger, broad kind of survey. What's a book or two books that kind of would rise to the top of your list on that? Where to get started? What will really kind of hook you in?
There are Mrs. Carr's old books.
Oh, nice. Nice. Line, I just want to put a word out there. What you just saw from our young friend Linus was the way you do this. This is the way to do it. Now, in all seriousness, her older books are excellent. I mean, we have her books in my book nook because we found that at our church, because parents like to get those in the hands of their kids precisely for that reason. So we tease you, but that's a really good answer. Those are great.
Emma, you can't say Mrs. Carr.
No.
You've got to give us a different answer.
Well, I was going to, because seriously, the biographies of specific individuals, like those are what I read when I was younger. Like my dad would read them aloud Sunday afternoons. So I legit was going to say that, but now Linus has stolen my answer.
Well, that's a legit answer, but yeah.
There was a lot of like historical fiction that I read when I was younger of like church missionaries and stuff. There's with Daring Faith. That's not a historical fiction, but that's a really good biography. I don't know. Biographies are cool. A lot of I don't know. My mom gave me a bunch that she read when she was younger. She was like, these are cool. I was like, wow, these are really cool.
Yeah.
Daring Faith is a biography of who?
Amy. Wait, I'm gonna get it wrong. Hold on. Let me look it up because there are two. There's Amy Carmichael and Gladys Aylward, and I always get their names mixed up.
Okay.
So
both are great people to read about. Absolutely. Yeah. And we've had, we mentioned Sandy Finlayson earlier, his wife, Linda
it's
Finlayson.
Amy Carmichael.
Amy Carmichael. There you go.
That's what I had in my head. And I was like, I'm going to be wrong on Mortification of Spin. And live it down. I should have just stuck with my gut.
Yeah. We've all been wrong on Mortification of Spin at some point in time.
My grandma's going to listen to this. I can't be wrong.
Our friend Linda Finlayson has written a number of little biographies for younger readers on various figures that are great to get in the hands of younger readers as well. She's got a whole series of them.
Yeah.
Right. And you could also always listen to the wonderful podcast, Kids Talk Church History.
Exactly. Kids Talk Church History.
Podcast you'll ever listen to.
So how often, like, do y'all record every week, or does it come out more staggered than that?
We record every 2 weeks.
Okay.
Every month.
Really? Oh,
yeah.
Yes, every month.
We record every month, 2 episodes every month.
2 episodes a month.
But not all the hosts are in every episode.
Gotcha.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Okay. I have one more question before I turn it back over to Carl. And I'm going to put you in a really uncomfortable position because Carl is sitting here. Who's been, when you've had some guests, who's been your favorite? How about this? You know what? I'm not going to put you on the hot seat. I'll say, other than Carl Truman, other than Carl Truman, who's been your favorite person to meet and talk to?
The top of the also rans, you mean? Todd?
Right, exactly. Exactly. The runners up.
Oh man. Names are hard to remember, but the person, oh man, I'm going to forget which episode. I just remember his closing. You'll remember Linus and Mrs. Carr, but it was the guy who was like, if you want to learn church history, you should read Shakespeare and Jane Austen. And I was like, this is my guy.
That sounds like something Carl Truman would say.
Not Jane Austen. Not Jane Austen.
Austen is the best.
The Bronte is all way.
Bronte is darker. That's why.
That was the guy with the beard, right? The really long beard.
Okay.
I think so. I don't. Yeah.
Well,
look for a guy with a beard. That's what we're talking about.
We'll just have to listen to all the episodes. To
That's right.
That's right.
That was John Bear. John Bear. Yeah.
The Orthodox theologian.
The Orthodox. He
Wow.
told us about Irenaeus.
Wow, that's impressive. He did some amazing stuff on the early church, John Bear.
Yes.
I'm impressed. I'm impressed.
And
That
So-
was not the guy I was talking about, but I'm sure he was cool too. I was on that episode.
So really what we're concluding here is that our friends in China might need to switch podcasts, right? Instead of listening to Mortification of Spin, start listening to Kids Talk Church History. Okay.
They can do both.
Yeah.
Also, we need to be better at remembering names. That's another thing.
Well, yeah. Well, this has been really good. I mean, I was not aware of the podcast until I saw that we were interviewing you all, and that Carl had mentioned that he'd been on with you guys, and I thought, man, this is great. And very seriously, I want to tell moms and dads out there, if you want your kids listening to some things that they'll enjoy, that are interesting, and that might kind of raise the bar on what they can start to learn to expect of themselves, this is a great place for them to go, where they're going to learn some things, they're going to be encouraged, and they're going to listen to some of their peers talk about things that really matter. And that's a great example to set for your kids. And so, watch out for this podcast, check it out. I'm excited about what they're doing. And then I want to encourage our listeners to do one other thing too. I want you to go to our website, mortificationofspin.org, and I want you to register to win a copy of Simonetta Carr's newest book, Church History. I've already praised it. I'm just telling you, you want this book in your home. Pastors, you want to get this church out to this book out to folks in your church. It's a wonderful survey of church history. It addresses all of the people that you would expect it to address, as well as, and Simonetta alluded to this earlier, as well as people you've probably not heard of before, but ought to know about. And along the way, it is a book that if it's out there in your living room, your kids are going to pick up and start looking at it, and you want that to happen. So get a hold of this book. You can register to win a free copy at our website. While you're there, if you want to make a donation to the Alliance of Confessing Evangelicals, please do that. And I want to say a special thank you to Emma Sloan and Linus Plotner, and of course, Simonetta Carr, for being with us. It's been so great to meet you two. So glad what you are doing, and we hope you keep doing it. So thanks for being on with us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. And to our listeners, we say thank you for joining us, and we look forward to being with you next time.
Don't know much about history. Don't know much biology. Don't know much about a science book. Don't know much about the French I took. But I do know that I love you. And I know that if you love me too, what a wonderful world this would be. La ta 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 ta.
Thanks for listening to Mortification of Spin, a podcast of the Alliance of Confessing Evangelicals. For more on topics like this, visit mortificationofspin.org, where you can find other articles by Carl and Todd, browse the archive of past episodes, and make a donation. We'll talk to you next time on Mortification of Spin.